You introduce the staff that's assisting today?
Yes, thank you. To my right, Chief Deputies John Bishop and Karen Turgovich. To my left, Chief Counsel Michael Laufer, and assisting the board today are Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis.
Thank you very much. Most of you know our emergency evacuation procedure, but let me just remind you, in case you don't know, look for the exits nearest you. There are lit and unlit signs. If you hear an emergency sound, there's an emergency, and please leave in an orderly way. Take your stuff, obey traffic signals, all of that. Our meeting place is in Cesar Chavez Park over there. If you want to know when the all clear comes to go back, stay with us there and you'll find out. The meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please turn off your cell phones or set them on silent. Also, try to speak close to the microphone. This is a do as I say, not as I do thing. It's hard to do. You have to pretend you're a rock star, and it's a little uncomfortable, but that is particularly important for people who are listening on the webcast. All right. Oh, good. Presentation of Superior Accomplishment Awards. I love these.
Oops. Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Vicki Whitney, Deputy Director for Water Quality, and I'm here this morning to present 3 Superior Accomplishment Awards to water quality staff. This is not a team award. These are 3 individual awards, although 2 of them are for staff who worked on the same project. So first I'd like to call up Walt Shannon. Walt is here, and he'll be working later today on one of your agenda items on the Caltrans stormwater permit. As you all know, in the fall of 2010, the board identified the 3 of the stormwater permits as high priority projects. The board adopted the Caltrans permit a little over a year ago, but we sort of punted on TMDL implementation at the time because it was so complicated. There were so many TMDLs, they were all over the state. And so Walt is getting this award for his leadership in figuring out a way to address all of these TMDLs in various regions and how to implement them in the permit in an efficient manner. He obviously was helped by the members of his staff, and I'd like to call one of them up, Jaime Favilla. Jaime is one of the environmental scientists who work for Walt, and Jaime and Walt, together with the other team members, which included some of the regional board staff, worked very hard. What they did was they categorized all of the TMDLs by region, so they made this big humongous matrix that talked about each TMDL in each region, and then they lumped them together. And then they convened a team of regional board staff to look at commonalities, so that instead of going through these things one at a time, we grouped them. And what they found was that a lot of the contaminants that are related to discharges by Caltrans are associated with sediment. And once they went through all that analytical work, they were able to address the TMDLs in a much more efficient manner. And so for Walt's leadership and for Jaime's organizational skills, they're getting this award, and you'll hear more about the outcome later when the agenda item comes up. But I'd like to congratulate both of them. These are always fun awards to give because they come with checks. Separately or together? And then I'll do the 3rd award after we do the pictures for this one. As you know, we've started working on marijuana. We formed a committee. We like to call it the Joint Committee. And Jaime demonstrated such outstanding organizational skills in this project that we're offering to have him work with Chris Kerrigan on organizing the Joint Committee work. So, you know, you got to get a laugh when you work in state government. So the next honoree that I'd like to invite up is Janice Zinke. We love Janice. One of the reasons we love Janice is because she had a guide dog puppy that she brought to our office for a year. And we decided that having a dog in the division was great therapy. And after the dog actually didn't make it into the guide dog program because of slight hip dysplasia issues. So Janice now has a really wonderfully trained new pet, and we'd like to have her back in the office because after a particularly hard meeting, it was really nice to go play with the dog, and it helped our mental health. So if there's anything that you can do to facilitate getting this dog back in the office, we would all very much appreciate it. But that aside, that's not why Janice is getting the award. That's just my lobbying effort. Janice has been responsible for implementation of 3 high priority projects. They weren't priority projects that you identified, but they were high priority projects nonetheless. The first one was preparation of the AB 2222 report to the legislature. That's the one on, contaminated groundwater. Communities relying on contaminated groundwater. And the second one was the preparation of the SBX2 report to the legislature on nitrates in groundwater. And the third one was implementation of water board requirements in the SB4 report to the legislature on fracking. So Janice has been very, very busy, which is why she really needed a therapy dog too. Janice has done a wonderful job. As you all know, these are highly controversial reports. They're important for the state of California. They're going to form the foundation of how we move forward in terms of addressing a lot of the groundwater contamination issues. And they sort of set the stage for moving the drinking water program over to the state board as well. So we are looking forward to working both with Dogger more and also with the drinking water folks to help make sure that Californians all have an opportunity to access clean and reliable drinking water supplies. And I want to thank Janice for her efforts. She's really been instrumental in carrying out these projects and getting these reports to the legislature.
Thank you. Thank you.
No check in this box, but I was told it was because she already got it in the mail.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
John Borkovich, you want to come up here and get in the picture? John is Janice's supervisor. John nominated her for the award. And that concludes the presentation of the awards. Thanks.
Thank you, Vicki. Those are terrific. Great work. If it wasn't clear, we were on mic but not on the record when we talked about scheduling. We anticipate that item 12, which is talking about mill, deer, and another creek, which I should know, antelope, will not come up before 1 o'clock. So if people, hopefully everything we talk about is scintillating and you're interested and want to watch every moment of it, but for your scheduling purposes, we can relieve folks who are either here or listening on the webcast and assure them that item 12 won't come up before 1 o'clock. Okay. Now we're into the public forum, and this is when we hear from anybody who wants to talk about a matter that is not pending before the board. Do we have any? We have no comment cards. All right. Minutes, May 6th. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Any corrections, additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved. Now we'll go to board member reports. I'm going to start with Board Member Moore.
Thank you, Chair Marcus. Good morning, everyone. This last couple weeks, just report on a couple of highlights. Of course, I attended a 2-day regional board hearing, the regular meeting of the North Coast Regional Water Board. Of note was the Upper Elk River Sediment TMDL project. Was discussed, a lot of details and implementation ideas that staff had. It was something like a 5.5-hour hearing with a lot of public interest and interest from the timber companies. Of interest to this board is that just prior, about a week, the contract was signed for the cleanup and abatement account proposal that we approved the previous year and had to have an extension. And I know fellow board members were concerned about matching funds from the timber companies, which were secured consistent with what our expectations were. So that was good news. Moving along, on May 13th, I met with Director Carol D'Elia of the Little Hoover Commission. Back in 2010, they wrote a report about modernizing California water governance more at the state level. And some of the issues that we're grappling with, whether for drinking water, water rights, and that sort of thing, were contemplated maybe a little differently back in 2010. But they're considering this week, I think, whether to take on the issue of water governance versus energy governance. They have a lot on their plate. But I pointed them to some of the activities that staff is showing leadership on with the drinking water program. But we focused on state agency water functions, and then I drew attention to integrated water management at the local level and ideas for improving governance at the local level that would be mirrored within alignments in the state level. So I thought it was a good, productive discussion. And then along these lines, the next day, May 14th, I was on a panel with Secretary Laird, Secretary Ross, speaking to the California State Association of Counties. And folks were there from all 58 counties, as I could tell, from both elected officials and staff. So it was a very, the room was full, and we were talking about California's drought outlook. We gave some facts about the drought, reported generally on the drought task force. The secretaries performed that task mostly. I answered some questions about groundwater, the workshops that were held here with the governor's office. Our state water board concept paper for groundwater work plan that we've been discussing. But a lot of questions are about a very human element of this, which is, you know, you get a board of 21 different folks. They'll have 21 different opinions, you know, about how to manage the water, the ground and surface. And you know, is there any remedy to that, something the state could deal with? And, you know, the truth is, no, there's not a remedy to that. You know, that people have to get together and work through all of the different perspectives on the water management challenges and have these integrated forums where people have a chance to work through the issues and come up with a joint approach at the local level. You know, and so there was a lot of fruitful discussion, I believe, along those lines, a lot of frank discussion. So then quickly, let's see, May 15th, I met with Department of Water Resources. They're doing a strategic plan for the future of integrated water management. So we had a 2-hour meeting about state agency regulatory alignment, and just to give some props, I gave some examples from our 401 and 404 programs, but I also gave the example of this Caltrans effort that we're going to hear today. We just heard a staff award on it as an example of state agency alignment efforts that I think have been fruitful, you know, that we're starting to consider all our missions and really try to be more efficient. So that was good to bring to Department of Water Resources some of the examples out of our regulatory programs that they're not so familiar with, but where we make efforts to really integrate, our programs and to line up with folks like Fish and Wildlife and Caltrans and you name it. And then I attended on Friday, May 16th, with Vice Chair Spivey Weber, the meeting of the Southwest Mega Region Alliance. Sounds big. It's bigger than California. It includes Arizona and Southern Nevada as well as Southern California. But I might defer to Fran to talk more about it. It's a good group. It's led by Mark Pisano, who used to be the leader of the Southern California Association of Governments for over 30 years, is my understanding. A lot of vision about the future of infrastructure and how to finance it. It's a very serious issue as we change, the generations and what the expectations are to finance infrastructure and the need to be creative and to combine water, energy, and transportation really together, even as we struggle just to combine different functions of water itself. There's a greater challenge in terms of what we can fund in the future for future generations. So there's some important discussions going on. We want to stay engaged in these type of things to create these synergies and align our programs with all of the other efforts going on. So thank you for allowing me the time to report.
3 items that I wanted to update you and the staff on. First of all, seeing Deputy Director Haven in the audience there, I wanted to, because it can never be said often enough, acknowledge her good work on the drinking water program and the potential transfer. I had the opportunity, along with Tom Howard and some of our senior staff, to participate in a meeting with the drinking water program managers last week. We spent several hours together. They had a lot of very good questions. While there is always a bit of, uncertainty associated with any transition, I got the feeling that there was a lot of also excitement, and they were looking forward, just as we are, for the opportunity for collaboration and the consolidation of these efforts. So it was a very positive experience from my perspective, and it was wonderful to see the back and forth and observe the interaction between our managers. It's a good indication, I think, of things to come. So once again, thank you to Liz and also everyone, both at the Water Board and also at the Department of Public Health, who's been so critical in making this happen and talking about the transition. And I think we're going to be depending on them in the near future to make sure that, when this happens, that it goes forward smoothly. And together we craft this foundation for this consolidated vision that the governor and administration and all of us want to see happen. So thank you, Liz. An update. A while back, I mentioned that the California Environmental Dialogue was forming a work group to look at stormwater strategy. And so board member Moore and I participated in a couple of meetings of this work group, which was actually quite well represented, including both environmental as well as organizations such as Caltrans and the regulated community. And they actually, and I shouldn't expressed my surprise, but I was surprised. They actually managed to reach consensus on a very broad vision for stormwater management as a resource. And they also reached consensus on a framework with some, again, very broad concepts. And they submitted their final report to Mr. Howard, I think it was a week or 2 weeks or so ago. So I wanted to let you know that effort has been completed, and ask that the staff use that document as a starting point. I know that the staff will be scheduling some outreach meetings with stakeholders to formally kick off the development of the Stormwater Strategic Work Plan, and I think that's a good that's a good starting point to develop something, and perhaps used as a concept paper in some way to start off the discussion. And I would also add that there was a little bit of, I think, confusion, at least in my mind, in discussion with some of the staff in terms of the scope of the Stormwater Strategic Work Plan. And I would just say that from my perspective, and also in the discussion with the CED work group, I think we were looking at it as a broad strategy, not focused on just the regulatory functions of the stormwater program, but broader of how stormwater fits into a broader issue of water resource management to achieve multi-benefits. So I would encourage staff to broaden your focus for the Stormwater Strategic Work Plan if you have not already done so. And then finally, the Vice Chair and I met with OEHA Director George Alexev and his staff and received an excellent briefing on Cal EnviroScreen 2.0. And one of the things, and I think maybe some of you have a briefing scheduled as well, one of the new things that's being incorporated into this update is an exposure indicator associated with drinking water and drinking water quality. So my request is of Mr. Howard of two things. One, I don't know to what extent our staff is engaged in with OEHA's work on Cal EnviroScreen. I know that they are soliciting comment on this draft version that is out right now, and I would strongly encourage that we dedicate some staff time to reviewing what they've done and providing some comments. I've yet to read the 300-page document, but just from my briefings, there were a few things that concerned me and a few things that really intrigued me. I will say that one of the things that concerned me is the use of public health goals instead of MCLs, maximum contaminant limits, I think, to determine relative toxicity in developing the toxicity-weighted water quality index. That's one of the things that I hope staff will look into. I would like to have a follow-up discussion, and I want us to be able to provide comments such as those relating to the use of PHG versus MCLs back to OEHA. And then the second request I have of staff is, this is a tool that's being developed by Cal EPA's risk assessing organization, and we are part of Cal EPA. To the extent then that we should be using these tools, we should look to see how we should be using it or how we can incorporate these tools into our activities. And the first thing that popped into my mind is the high risk nitrate maps that staff has been working on. One of the constituents that OEHA is including in their drinking water quality exposure indicator is nitrate. So please take a look at what they're doing, the data that they're gathering, how they're using it, and the potential to use that, if appropriate, in developing our high-risk nitrate maps. I don't want us to use a different methodology and Cal EPA and the other agencies to use a different methodology. To the extent that we can come together and just use one tool, let's make sure that we at least look into it and do our best to see if that would be a workable solution for us.
I attended 2 board meetings, Region 4 and Region 9. In Region 4, for those who are working on ASBSs, the ocean protected areas, Malibu has come up with some absolutely delightful, and it would be fun to have them shown here. They're funny, and they really are very, very good at addressing pollution issues on the beach. So, and I'd like to, for Region 9, Paul Hann was there and made a wonderful presentation on the trash work that is being done by our staff. He was very careful to say that the board had not made any decisions on it. But one of the things that he and I both learned is that a fellow who has been working on the San Diego River for 13 years said that about 75% of the trash that comes into the San Diego River comes in from homeless encampments along the river. And so that is something that we need to make sure we look into as we are developing the trash policy. I went on a tour of Carlsbad desalination plant with Tam Doduk, and also we met the next day with Region 9 about how they have incorporated their strategic plan into their operations work and how they're holding staff responsible in their annual reviews to to carry out portions of the strategic plan. Both were very informative, and the Carlsbad facility is expected to be online in September of 2015, and so they had just learned that for the on energy, that their co-location with the energy facility is going to come to an end in June of 2017, I believe. So, or 2016. And so they are working on that as well. The California Energy Commission has had workshops and hearings about new standards for toilets, urinals, and shower heads. And this is something that we should be paying attention to from our water quality side, as well as just as an organization, because there are some controversies associated with this. But once the standards are in place, they will apply to everything that is sold in California. And so it is extremely important that we look at these, particularly in this time of drought. And I did meet with a commissioner to whom this matter is. He's in charge of this, Alexander. McAllister, Commissioner McAllister, and so he is in charge of this and is very interested in our opinion on the standards that they are considering. I attended a meeting at Stanford with the Northern California recycled water folks. I mostly spend time with the Southern California water recycling folks. I'm very impressed with the movement in Northern California into recycling, and there is a lot going on, and so it was a pleasure to get caught up. I also, as Steve mentioned, went to the Mega Region, the Southwest Mega Region Alliance meeting. And I guess the most important thing that came from that for me was that the state of California, the agencies in California who deal with financing, particularly infrastructure financing, this would be the iBank, and then some efforts to create some new institutions associated with infrastructure development that is in the budget trailer bill language now, that these are alive and well and very focused and very interested in including water and green infrastructure as a part of what they do. So I think we've got our finance folks in the room, and I just want to make sure that we are staying in touch with the other financing parts of the state of California, because we are all kind of in this together, and there's a lot of interest in local investments with public-private partnerships, as well as investments with the federal government, and so we need to stay on top of that. And finally, I met with the mayor's office in Los Angeles, and they too are very, very interested in engaging on the recycled water funds that we've set aside, as well as stormwater and conservation. And so an area that kind of runs hot and cold in terms of activity. I would say they're as engaged as I have ever seen them in my 15 years of working with the city. So it's quite exciting, and I think will offer leadership in that region. So that's my report.
Okay, so on May 8th, I was at Aqua's conference and participated in the attorneys program on a panel on groundwater. I understand that the chair also was on a panel, so groundwater was, of course, the hot topic, along with drought, at the conference this year. And on that panel, myself, Scott Slater, and David Guy. And I'd say the most interesting thing for me that came out of the panel was the perspective from many attorneys that were not just on the panel, but through their questions, the audience about sustainable yield and their dealings with current law and basins that are adjudicated with respect to sustainable yield, and their sense that the definition is really quite broad and that it can encompass some of the things that I think is being talked about as part of the legislation. So interesting discussion, lots of questions, and I chose in my presentation to just pose a lot of questions because we don't really have an official position yet on this issue. Then on the 12th, I went to Tulare along with other representatives from the administration, Secretary Ross, OES Director Ghilarducci, and others to meet with Kings, Tulare, and Kern County regarding drought impacts. And the main focus was really just the broad array of not just water supply impacts, but impacts on, in particular, this area with respect to disadvantaged communities. This is really ground zero. This is the Friant, in large part, the Friant service area. And the focus there was mostly working with government entities, good attendance by elected officials and local county and city officials. On the 14th, I did a presentation before the Cut Flower Commission of California. So first of all, I thank them for my Mother's Day gift. And we talked a lot about drought impacts. I learned a lot about areas of the state that are serviced by the State Water Project that I wouldn't have necessarily thought the State Water Project was delivered. So they're very much impacted by the drought. They're interested in moving toward recycled water, and in a couple of areas, San Diego in particular, they've experienced some problems. So I did encourage them to participate in the discussions on the upcoming reg. On the 14th, I attended a premiere, Thirsty for Justice, the struggle for human right to water. This was a Sacramento premiere at the California Museum presented by the EJ Coalition for Water. And let's just say that the state board was very well represented. Barbara was there, Liz, quite a few people. Gita actually did a presentation. So this was just a real exciting opportunity to be there with the EJ Coalition and lots of others that are supporting the coalition for the human right to water. And great to just see folks that aren't necessarily involved in any organization that showed up to support, well, first of all, to learn more and to support the cause. So hopefully we'll be getting copies to all of us of this video. It's a terrific presentation and great to see a lot of the people that we know, people that presented to us at the Central Coast Petition. A number of them are in the video. On the 16th, I attended last Friday the Almond Board's annual tour, and it was a good opportunity to ask some questions of the experts, the certified crop advisors that are advising almond growers, to ask them about irrigated lands and implementation of current programs and what are they seeing on the ground. And one of the things that was the most surprising for me, and this is not the first time that I've heard this, I think Member Dodick and I heard this when we were in Central Coast as well, and that is accounting for the amount of nitrates that are in the irrigation water. And it doesn't really translate in a one-to-one. The crop doesn't seem to be uptaking all that is in the water. And so I know this is an issue that the expert panel will be grappling with, but always helpful to be out in the field and hear from folks about how they're actually seeing things on the ground. Let's see here. And then the last thing that I wanted to do is send just a big thank you to Liz Haven and team and Department of Public Health. I received an email on Friday, didn't get to it until late in the day, about 4:30. A number of people contacted me, elected officials, about a well failure in La Grande, which is a disadvantaged community on the east side of Merced. And I thought, oh boy, here it is late in the day. So I sent emails out to Liz and Jim, and over the next 24 hours. There was a flurry of emails. Everybody was just on top of it right away and contacted the community, and there is, you know, sort of a tentative plan in place to deal with that well failure. So I concur with Member Dodek's comments that it's just really exciting to see the teams, our staff and CPDH working so closely together even prior to the transition. And then the last thing I wanted to say is just I concur with Member Dodek's concern about the public health goal as opposed to MCL. So I would like to hear, you know, after staff gets a chance to take a look at this and perhaps consider comments so that I could provide my comments as well. Thank you.
I want to start by thanking Board Member Dodek for suggesting we do these board member reports. As, for many of you may wonder why we're doing this. Part of it is transparency, but part of it is the five of us do not get to talk together except in front of all of you or whoever is here and the webcast. And while we can have individual conversations about individual things, we do try to be careful on that and remember that on a particular issue you can only talk to one. So it's very helpful, and I really appreciate it. I was out on personal for a while, so I'll just mention a couple of things. Most of my time has been spent on the drought various things, and then groundwater and drinking water, similar to many of you. I really miss stormwater. I'm glad we have a stormwater thing. I'm one of those people. Remember, I was the one quoted saying sewage was my first love, and then I found garbage, but that was before I discovered stormwater and the beauty of stormwater. In any event, so I've been doing presentations about primarily drinking water and groundwater, but I always talk about the drought and the water action plan in terms of trying to make the point that one of the main things we're trying to do in this administration is really take an integrated approach to water and think about every precious water molecule as the resource it is, both in terms of supply and in terms of quality for a variety of uses, drinking water, ag, industrial, you name it. And it's been really gratifying because there are many people with a lot of expertise in water who know their piece of it, or it's not even a silo, it's just their area very well, and it's been gratifying to see how many people seem to appreciate the broader view of issues. In some cases, finding out that there are issues of enormous impact that are even bigger than the things they're consumed with, and I was glad we did the award for the reports on nitrates and AB 2222, because I think the issue of contaminated groundwater in general is probably the one where we've seen the biggest public policy shift in the shortest amount of time of anything I've seen in the past 3 or 4 decades, in a way that I think has really brought out the best in people in terms of rising to the occasion. And so it's been fairly gratifying. So I talked with Aqua, and I talked with the legal committee later. They do have different views because they can see the litigation that will ensue from language. So if anything, they were looking at far more specific language, I think, than people were thinking about. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens through the legislative session in terms of more versus less, in terms of being prescriptive. I tend to be more less is more, but the lawyers made a pretty compelling case for specificity being of benefit. So it just will be an interesting public policy dialogue to watch. I also spoke with the Central Valley Clean Water Agency group across the board. Those are the POTWs in the Central Valley. They, other than SAC Regional, they tend to be smaller. They have they don't have quite the resources that many of the large POTWs we work with do, and it was actually a really enjoyable way to spend some time. And today I'll be meeting with the California Water Association, which are the private folks. And I'll be talking about drinking water, which is what they've engaged with us on in terms of the Drinking Water Task Force. But again, they changed their mind and did want a broader view of what are the key issues facing us at this era. You know, what's the paradigm shift we're in across the board, and where does drinking water fit into it? So that'll be today at lunchtime. So looking forward to that. Great. Anything else? Okay. In the interest of time, we'll move on. Next, we'll move to the, let me remind, some new people have walked in. Item 12 is not going to come up until 1 o'clock. So if anyone needs to know that, or if new people have joined us on the webcast. We now have some, we think, uncontested items 3 and 4. Do we have any cards for 3 or 4? All right. Do I have a motion on 3?
So moved.
So second?
For both or for 3? For both.
Both.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. It's approved. We will probably take a short break that will be, like a 10-minute bio break, but we'll do it after this next item. So, Mr. Howard, will you introduce item number 5?
Thank you. Item number 5 is an informational item. Mary Ann Dickinson and with the Alliance for Water Efficiency and David Mitchell with McCubed will be making a presentation to the board on the outcome of conservation rate studies from the Alliance of Water for Water Use Efficiency.
Thank you for joining. Honor to have you both. We've
Thank
been
you
looking
very
forward to
much.
this.
Thank you very much for having us, Chair Marcus, members of the State Water Resources Control Board. We're very happy to be here to talk to you about a project that we've undertaken that I understand is of interest to you and that you asked us to come and report to you on. It's a project working with water utilities on the issue of financing sustainable water. And what we'd like to do is give you a little background on the project, what we're doing, and describe the work products that are coming out of this project that we think will be of great interest to you as board members as you consider potential actions related to the emergency drought declaration. So just moving forward, with me is David Mitchell from MCubed, who is one of the consultants who's worked very closely with us on the project, and he is going to be describing the model that we're going to talk to you about very shortly. But just by way of background, the reason, let me just explain to you who the Alliance for Water Efficiency is, because many of you may remember me from the California Urban Water Conservation Council, so you may be confused as to this new hat that I'm wearing. The Alliance for Water Efficiency, similar to the CUWCC, is a nonprofit organization devoted to water efficiency, conservation, and the sustainable use of water, but across all 50 states as well as the 13 provinces in Canada. So we are a North American organization devoted to many of the same principles and practices that CUWCC stood for. And we created this national organization out of CUWCC because we were getting so many requests from all over the country for advice on water efficiency programs and practices and what really works. So we've set up a national platform. We're headquartered in Chicago, but we have a lot of California members, so I'm in California quite a bit. California and Texas are the 2 states where we have the most number of members. And so by way of background, the reason we got into the rates issue is that we saw our water supplier members struggling with what was becoming termed the new normal of declining demand. And with that declining demand was coming declining revenues, declining water sales. And we became very concerned about this issue because in that phenomenon we were seeing drastic cutbacks in water efficiency programs, not because they didn't provide long-term benefit, but because they provided short-term pain that people were having trouble dealing with. How do you deal immediately with the reduced sales coming to a water utility at a time when the revenue was needed? So we got very concerned. We thought if we don't attempt to deal with this issue and come up with some good solutions for it, we may lose the important momentum for water efficiency that's needed. So we did gather 30 chief financial officers in water utilities, rate experts who are well published in the field of rate making, economists. We gathered them all together for a summit discussion in August of 2012. And one of the documents you have in front of you, this one, summarizes the results of that summit and basically talked about what were the problems that were resulting in this phenomenon of reduced sales and how do we come up with a solution set to deal with that. So we had a second summit to discuss those solutions that was just held April 30th to May 2nd. Max Gomberg of the State Board staff was one of our summit participants, so we were very pleased that the State Board was involved in a discussion. See if I can get this to go forward. It's not going forward. There we go. Okay, so some of the issues that we discussed are the issues that we are addressing in our solutions. You know, why are water sales declining? Are they declining for predictable and remediable issues? Are water utility revenues falling short of those revenue requirements? And if so, and they are, how do we address that? Do we have primarily a messaging problem with our customers? If customers are angry with rate increases, is it because we're not messaging correctly why those rate increases are necessary? And what methods are available to repair this revenue loss and to improve fiscal stability for water utilities? They need to be revenue stable so that they can maintain infrastructure and deal with the drought actions and water efficiency investments in a steady, predictable way. And so lastly, what industry standards, practices, policy reforms can be brought to bear on this issue to solve the problem? So our project is focused on a number of solutions. We want to provide rate setting assistance, to give tools to the financial officers in water agencies to help them develop rate structures that promote water efficiency but also are fiscally sustainable, that promote revenue stability at the same time that they encourage consumer response to conservation. And so how do we identify, select, and promote these rate options and bring them to the water provider community? How do we deal with the unexpected changes in weather and climate? I mean, we had 2 very wet years in a row that plummeted water sales across the country. Now we're in a reverse phenomenon. How do you adjust for these wide swings? How do you perhaps hedge against that risk? What industry policies, practices, and standards can we develop to help set best practices for financial planning? And same with messaging and communication strategies. How do we basically work better with local elected officials who have to approve these rate increases and customers who need to support them and participate in the discussions? So that's going to be a big piece of our project. And just fundamentally driving change. How do we accelerate adoption of new strategies for dealing with these issues? So we developed this project to provide good guidance and resources for water suppliers of varying technical abilities, from the conservation coordinator who plans programs to the CFO who is a sophisticated financial manager. We want to be able to develop a suite of tools that all can use. And so as part of that, we developed a public domain rate model, which David is going to show you, that can help model various scenarios and solve for flaws in that analysis. People are making fundamentally the same types of mistakes, from poor demand forecasting to poor evaluation of what their actual revenue target should be. And so this model, we hope, will be a tool that will help. We also are publishing a handbook that will explain the key concepts of this kind of planning, provide case study examples, and direct implementation advice. And all of this is going to be housed on a website that will be publicly available to everyone, that will convey not only our information and research, but others as well, so that we give those who have to deal with this issue the best collection of materials to help them with their problem. So here's the draft of the website page that we're building. It's called Financing Sustainable Water. That's going to be our logo. So it's financingsustainablewater.org. So this is just a mock-up of what the site will look like, but it'll have all of these materials, that the handbook, the rate model, and other information on messaging and communications tools on this website. So the handbook, just to give you a few bits of information about the handbook, it's organized in a way to allow ready access to these issues to not only the elected official, but to the rate manager that has a more sophisticated understanding. And then we have detailed appendices that go into the formulas and the very specific rate setting policies that a more technical, advanced rate maker would want to see. But fundamentally, we want to deal with the implementation issues and the financial policies that will help guide a water provider. You know, what should be, you know, their goal in setting financial reserves? How should they be dealing with the variance in their you know, weather and their revenues? How do they smooth that out and stabilize that? And what's the role of rate making, and not only bringing them the revenues they need, but encouraging conservation and providing a signal to the customer? Because that's fundamentally the really important thing that we have. that we want to focus on. The heart of the problem for us is that water rates have been historically focused on cost recovery in the past, and not predictive methods that enable them to react quickly to what a consumer might be doing in terms of a response to a rate signal. And when the system costs change dramatically and sometimes unpredictably, doing a historical approach, as has always been done, is not going to correctly give a signal for today's cost consequences. And so we need to give the consumers the correct information so that they make the right consumptive decisions. And this is a little chart that shows that flow. If you start with the costs, that you embed the costs in your water rates, but those water rates and how they're set influence demand, which then influences the system design, which goes back into costs. So that's an active feedback loop, and you have to make sure that your rates are able to adjust with the changes in that loop. So we know it's a balancing act for water utilities. They don't want to overcharge their customers. They want to be, they're nonprofit. They're not, most of our water agencies in California are not private companies, as 20% of the deliveries are. 80% are publicly driven agencies that are not supposed to make a profit on water sales. So it's a balancing act. You have to generate enough revenue to pay your costs, but you also want to provide an efficient use of that resource and provide a signal to the customer, and then you need to balance that all and be fiscally sustainable. So this slide shows a little output from our water conservation tracking tool, which shows what the deep benefit is of conservation going forward. Those are all those lines, the blue bars below the zero line. There's lots of long-term benefit to conservation, but there is short-term pain that has to be accounted for. The reduced demand results in reduced water sales, and that has to be planned for, and it can be planned for. Because you want to keep your price signal a two-way street. You want utility rates to signal to the customer what the real costs are of providing water service, but the customer's consumption patterns need to be transmitted back to the utility for adjustments in that rate and in the water service. You don't want to overbuild your system because you think the demand is going to be that high. You want to be able to have this be a dynamic loop. So that dynamic loop is a convenient vehicle for modeling, and that's one of the reasons why we built a rate model, and I'll turn it over to David in a minute. But we have underestimated the willingness, we believe, of customers to provide that rate signal and to adjust those rates accordingly. So that active participation with the water supplier and the customer is one we are exploring. So the handbook that we're producing is going to answer a lot of these questions. How does weather affect customer consumption? If I change my rates, what happens to the demand, volume, and revenue? How should I plan for water rates under the contingency of drought pricing, which we're all in now? And what is the likelihood of deficit? The probability management is a huge issue here. And from a fiscal sustainability standpoint, how do we keep the revenue stable? What are the likelihoods for stability over a 5-year time horizon? And then lastly, we need to be very mindful of what customers can afford. That's a huge consideration in the design of rates, and that's not something we want to ignore. So, as I mentioned, the handbook has a lot of detailed appendices, and they will be giving, very specific technical information, but the handbook itself will provide, we hope, the guidance to water suppliers right now that are struggling with this issue. So I'd like to turn it over now to David, because we're very proud of the model that David has built. It's a very interesting tool that is not too sophisticated that somebody like me couldn't use it. You don't have to be a modeler to use this tool, and it provides some really important answers to the questions that we've been raising.
But it helps if you are a modeler. Thank you, board, for having me. It's on, but I just have to put it closer. Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. So as Marianne said, this is one of the outputs from the overall initiative. The model is an Excel-based open source public domain model. It was built as a tool for retail water utilities and their rate consultants. And it is aimed at addressing 3 core areas that I'll touch on briefly this morning. So The first would be to assist utilities in understanding implications of alternative rate designs in terms of revenue, sufficiency, demand response, and affordability. The second area where the model is focused is on helping utilities understand how their current rate system would perform or how alternatives might perform in instances where voluntary or mandatory curtailments are needed to balance available supply with demand, as we are currently doing all over California right now. And in fact, we are using this model in California to assist utilities in this exercise. And then the third area is to help utilities translate uncertainties about future demand and revenue into risks. And the difference between uncertainty and risk is risk can be managed. If you can quantify that uncertainty and understand its distribution, you can put together strategies to better management and limit the surprises down the road. The model itself is built upon the utilities billing system and their data. So as its seed, it uses the actual data of the utility using the model and is built up from the current patterns of usage within their different customer groupings. This is just an example of some of the output in the first component of the model, which helps utilities assess alternative rate designs. And this is output from the model showing revenue impact and bill impact for customers. It gives distributional information as well as information on annual cost of a current rate design compared to an alternative rate design, as well as indicators of affordability. For the drought rate component of the model.
Can I ask a question on that? And if it's getting in the weeds, just to understand it, that bottom with the histogram,
Yes.
tell me what that chart says.
So this is a chart that
I'd be a good guinea pig for chart description
Excellent.
for the average person.
excellent.
'Cause
Okay. What
takes
this
my
is
time.
showing is the percentage of bills that would increase or decrease, and by how much, under an alternative rate design relative to the utility's current rate design. So it will indicate how many customers you are likely to impose additional cost upon, and how many customers are likely to see a reduction in their water cost as a
if they
result
didn't
of the
change
alternative.
their,
If they change the rate design.
but if they didn't change their consumption.
This has
Or-
factored in adjustments to consumption as well. Yes. So the model pulls from the empirical literature estimates of price response to changes in rates. And so that's all built into the model. The drought rate component of the model is really intended to deal with situations like we find ourselves in today, where you can evaluate the performance of alternative rate designs under water use curtailment. You can specify up to 4 drought stages. The curtailment levels can be varied by customer class, as often is done in the real world. Users can design drought-based rates by hand, as in just sort of trial and error, and there are also built-in calculators in the model that will aid the user to identify rate designs that would be revenue neutral and preserve the financial integrity of the system. This is just an example of some of the input worksheets in the model where the user is putting in information on the stage structure of their drought response plan, and they can indicate the percentage curtailment that they would expect from each stage, as well as the level of compliance that they think they would get from their customers.